Champions again!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another American Scouser podcast. I am your host, Timuchin from Chicago, surviving yet another storm today. And with us always is our regular crew. First off, we have Gally. Gally, what's happening, man?
Surviving yet another terrible international break.
I got a lot to talk about Turkey's game today, but don't worry about that. I already did another podcast for like 20 minutes. So also with us is Bickler. I probably was expecting a lot larger pumpkin selection for this week, knowing you had to have been to a pumpkin patch and stuff. What we got going?
I mean, I could go get them. They're over in the corner. I'm in a fine mood. I don't give a shit about international games, so I'm doing great.
Yeah, we'll get to the international games. We'll probably touch up on those. They're more kind of a nuisance in some ways. I don't know. At least for me, I'm becoming more and more club over country over time as I get older. Somehow getting more cynical. So speaking of cynical, let's start with our trivia section. I have a really dark one this week for you guys. So with the Newcastle ownership, which we'll talk a lot about because I kind of want to. It's been like a huge topic during this international break, probably more than the international games themselves. But so as a trivia, I was like thinking about this. This hits home close to Turkey a lot more. But so how many guys does the new Newcastle owner have to send to Turkey to torture, kill, and chop up a journalist? The closest number wins.
Allegedly.
Oh, allegedly. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, but actually, it's not allegedly. The guys were there. That has been proven. Allegedly, he is not aware of this. But
he claims he didn't know it happened.
Yeah, it just happened to happen to a guy that he didn't happen to like. But the correct answer, I don't know if you guys are going to get this, was 15. 15 is the correct answer. A small plane full of people sent over there. Hey, there's the pumpkin. But no, seriously, let's go to a lot lighter and easier trivia for this week.
First of all, there's no easy trivia, Timuchin, as has been proven by our last about 150,000 podcasts in which me and Paul get zero trivia questions right. There are none that are easy.
This is easy. So easy, you guys might even get it. So with the penalty that Turkey won with today in the 97th minutes in a very Turkish fashion, the whole World Cup qualification has been very Turkish. If you're not familiar with Turkish football or don't know what it feels like to be a Turkish football fan, there you go. Just follow this World Cup qualification. It's like the entire life in a nutshell right here. I've been suffering with this for 47 years. So with that penalty, I kind of figured I'd dig up some penalty numbers. Number of most penalties scored by a Liverpool player. And the highest of our current players. So it's a two-part question, and go. Paul, obviously, we're starting with you. Goes without saying.
Nowhere to go but up, right? I mean, all right. Please repeat the question.
Repeat.
Number of penalties converted as a Liverpool player. The top one is what I want, and also out of the current players, the highest one in that list.
So, I mean, I would assume that the highest at the club has got to be Gerrard. And then out of the current players on their international team, is that right?
No, the current team out of them, who ranks the highest? If Gerrard is one, who's the highest out of the current squad? There are no word games, man. Don't pick up on the
It's got to be. Well, I mean, listen. Don't get smug, all right? We've been struggling with this for for months, all right? Just because finally now our people are getting to see it in person. You don't act like you just started doing this.
Exactly.
I think, Mo seems like the obvious answer, but it's probably – you got Milner in there who's taken quite a few. Fab's taken quite a few. I'll just keep it simple, which is probably stupid, but I'll go Mo and Gerard.
What do you have, Gally? Number one and the top out of the squad right now.
So I'm going to go Gerard as well because I can't imagine anyone taking more over the amount of years he was on pens for Liverpool, but it probably is just because any trivia question that seems too obvious for itself is usually wrong. And I'm going to go Milner.
Paranoia with this trivia.
I'm going to go Milner because I think Milner was here for a good 2 years before Mo, took all the pens during that time, and has taken quite a few since Mo's been here. So I'm going to go, and he's only missed one ever. So I'm going to go Milner and Gerard.
Well, see, I told you guys it was easy, that even you guys would get it. So this week, because after all the complaining and whining last week, I figured I'd go with an easy one. So it is Gerard as the number one. Total goals scored is 47 with penalties. Out of the current team, it is James Milner with 19. Mo has 17 right now, so you would think, hopefully, by the end of the season, Mo would take that over. But
I gotta tell you,
that was not that painful.
Listen, I gotta tell you, I appreciate the sentiment, but it feels like free pizza in the break room during Employee Appreciation Week. That's what this feels like. Thanks, but it's not enough.
Right, which, by the way, basically means we get mediocre food on cheap dollar on the company, which basically means that you gave us a layup just to feed us shit. Yeah. So thank you for starting the show off well.
I
can't. We really just want you to change the culture around trivia. That's all we're asking.
Jesus Christ!
Or add
we'll get an LD or something. I just can't win with this trivia. So, okay, let's go back to our initial trivia of how many people does a new Newcastle owner have to send to Istanbul to torture, kill, and then chop up a journalist so he can be taken out in pieces. Correct answer, if you missed it and you're just joining us, is 15. Playing of 15 people is required for this task. So, gentlemen, this week, probably the biggest story in football, definitely the Premier League, is this dude with all the money has bought Newcastle. So there's a lot of different things to talk about this. But let's get your guys' initial reaction first. I feel like there's almost like an overreaction in some ways to not the fact that of who bought it and stuff, but more about this chart in terms of the money involved and stuff like that. But Bickler, so let's start with you. Or you know what? You already scared me before we started recording with the podcast. So let's start with Gally, because I know Bickler is just going to run with this. Gally, let's start with you. What is your initial reaction to it? I mean, either way, how it affected you when you heard it, whether it's money or the league's future or the where the money is coming from, all that kind of stuff. What's your take?
So I wasn't comfortable with it in any way, shape, or form. From the human rights standpoint of what these people have stood for, things that they've done in their country, things that they have gone on record as saying that they are against happening in their country, like progression of women, free speech amongst their people. There are things that I just philosophically have issues with. All that said, when we put it on a sport mentality, I'm one who thinks that this is a big deal. I believe that this will, over time, actually impact the landscape of the football that we've watched. And, I know everyone will have their own opinion on this. I've read people say, oh, now they'll win an FA Cup and celebrate like they're big-time champions. I will ask anyone to point out an instance where major money was invested into a professional sports team that didn't lead to on-field success. And I think it's hard to find one. Whether it's City, whether it's PSG, whether it's Inter Milan, whether it's AC Milan, they may be short-term, but they usually lead to success. And the biggest key here is these people have actually they have more money than they need to be successful. What I say about that is that last image you showed, they have 10 to 20 times as much net worth as any other professional sports organization out there. Therefore, if they want to invest their money into being successful, they will be. So I think that has to be taken as a serious thing when it comes to sporting argument.
So, Paul, let's get your take on this. I mean, to go back with what Gally's saying, I do agree that the money, especially like the high peak money, will eventually bring success, and it will be more than that. I mean, the biggest argument against that is you look at this list, and we're not even freaking on there. But, you know, there are teams over there that really don't have that much success to kind of like show for it. What is your take, Paul?
Oh boy, here we go. So, first of all, I think that Newcastle has been out of the conversation for a long time, and that's bad for football because it's a storied club with unbelievable fans, and it deserves to have proper ownership. So, to have Mike Ashley out of the picture, I can understand the joy that surrounds that. I'm hopeful that they have a new future. However, that being said, this is the worst possible case scenario, in my opinion. There are two things that I find really intriguing about this. A, to me, the Premier League as an association completely has blood on their hands. Second of all, I find it very interesting that the reaction to this is in nowhere similar to the reaction to the Super League. And it should be, if not more so. So we've dealt with the Abramoviches of the world, right? I mean, we've dealt with people with money often coming into money through not the cleanest of ways. We've dealt with Abramovich. The Cinderella story in the Champions League right now is a team that's founded by ex-KGB that's gone mobster, who's essentially funded a team through match fixing, drug trafficking, and gun running across the Ukrainian border. Those are all that sucks, man, and that's bled into the game, and that's what football has become. But this to me is a new line. This is a new level because we have the Premier League in one hand sitting here as the associative constructor of the best league in the entire world, in my opinion, in football. Their points of emphasis are to grow the women's game, to embrace the LGBT community, and for basically freedom and equality across the board. And now you allow a country who doesn't allow women to drive, who openly persecutes homosexuality, and who publicly or privately executes journalists who speak out against the state, to own one of your most storied franchises, clubs, teams in your league. And it all comes down to money. And the bottom line is they got stacks of suitcases put in front of them. They no longer wanted to sink money into funding money against the lawsuit that Mike Ashley was having this legal fight with them for the last 3 or 4 years. And they no longer wanted to deal with funding that sort of situation. And they decided, their excuses after 3 years, essentially 3 years of putting this off, we have enough evidence to support the fact that a public investment fund that's purchasing the club is not the operating state of Saudi. Bullshit. If you had your stance for 3 years and all of a sudden that's changed, it's because an extra suitcase full of money showed up and you didn't want to pay to deal with Mike Ashley anymore. And I'm sorry, it's bullshit. Like, you can't sit here and tell me you're concerned about the league and you want to listen to all the teams involved about the Super League, and that was because of all the other teams that didn't want it, you brought it back, when you made a unilateral decision to bring in the country of Saudi Arabia to own a club without any sort of consultation on any of the other teams who are all completely against it for good reason. And to me, I'm not worried about Newcastle owning Saudi's coming in and owning Newcastle and making them a perennial contender because they can inject all that cash in. I'm concerned about all those other human rights issues, about the LGBT community. What kind of message are we saying to the rest of the world for football in general? It's supposed to be the people's game. This is not that move. I'm sorry. It pisses me off. Like, to me, this is ridiculous. And I'm so frustrated and upset by the reaction I see online about the wrong things. Who fucking cares if they're challenging for titles? Who cares? Like, that's part of the game. New teams get new owners with money. That happens. All the other shit matters. And, like, to me, it's like, for the Premier League to allow this to happen is absolutely, like, I just throw my hands up, man. Like, I don't know what else to say. I'm kind of at a loss for words. And I just said a lot of them.
I think that's like the confusing or the frustrating part is I see a lot of talk over this past week and a lot of discussion, and it's all about the money coming in. Are they going to buy titles, blah, 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 and stuff like that. What we were kind of like already headed that way, and we're going to go that way. There's no way around it. And I kind of like brings me back to a lot of like the FSG conversations we have that, there is a certain fan base that is against, what FSG has done. Some of them, obviously, most of them, they have had to backtrack on based on the response they got. That doesn't fit like Liverpool and the city and like, the overall ethics of the club and stuff. But there's another group that's only against FSG just because they want somebody who's going to spend a lot of money. And they really don't care about all the other stuff. And this kind of like what you're saying, Paul, is, that's what scares me. A lot of people are like, whatever. Like, it's almost like, I understand, a lot of people who made a lot of money have probably some kind of stuff that's not so ethical to kind of like add money on top of money and stuff. But we're talking like a totally different category. But weren't we already here with, PSG and City and stuff? This is almost like a more extreme example, Gally.
Yeah, well, it's an example of one that is 10 times the size. Like, everyone talks about, like, oh, this is just another, Newcastle is just finding new, Saudi money or oil money to be invested in. This is so much bigger than that. They are literally 10 to 15 times the size of the group that owns City. They have done so much worse in the political landscape and the overall just human rights aspects of things. They've almost stood up for what they believe in. And everything they believe in strikes against everything that I feel the Premier League, and Paul just alluded to, is standing for. And that is where I have the problem here, the hypocrisy of the Premier League. How they are getting
and its supporters.
And right. And just in their supporters. Now, I almost take the supporters out of it. You know why? Because I believe we're the greatest supporters in the world. I genuinely believe that, right? Yet for every argument we have, we get in a fight with these FSG out folks who wanted to tell us how the Super League was going to destroy English football, right? They wanted to fight about wrangling down the Super League and all the terrible things FSG was going to do by investing in this, or using $1 worth of the pandemic funds to furlough employees, right, in England. Yet now we're listening to the Premier League admit that they will sell their souls against their race relations, against the LGBT community, against the female game, purely to get Mike Ashley out of the business model. And it's just ridiculous, guys. Like, it's asinine to even believe. And, David can tell us who the first 3 signings are for Newcastle, and I understand it. I kind of argued against some of the Liverpool folks. I read a lot of people say, oh, they're going to be a mid-table fodder, and I didn't even really care where they were going to fall in the table with all the issues that were coming up. The truth of the matter is they're going to be good because they're going to sign players who want to play for them and want big wages. They will win because they will get a big manager to come play there come work there because they will get someone to take $8 to $10 million a year. They'll become winners the same way City became a winner, PSG became a winner, Inter Milan became a winner. But at the end of the day, those Newcastle fans I understand why they believe that they want to, that they can hold their nose, but I don't believe at the end they will actually be able to do it when they see the actual track record of the people in which.
See, I think a lot of people will not care. I mean, the same way that we have seen, and that's kind of like my point, and like David Cosgrove was, like alluding to, we already had this in the Premier League. And I understand what you're saying, with the money behind their bringing, and maybe they have a worse record, but it's not like City's owners have like a great record for this, and they're like other teams. So we already opened the door. How do you then shut it? I think it's too freaking late. I mean, if I'm a Newcastle fan, I'm going to be like, yeah, at least, your old owner sucked. This old owner might be doing some shady things, chopping up a journalist here and there. But, at least we're going to have a good team kind of thing. And because, the fandom sometimes kicks in. And like I say, I even say it with Liverpool fans. Let's not fool ourselves. A lot of the fans you follow, you read it online, they sometimes are against FSG, and they're okay with it being replaced by an owner like this, right? I mean, I read it a lot. As long as somebody's signing the checkbook, they don't care how that bank account is being formed in the background. Paul, I guess that's my thing, and not that I'm agreeing with it, but this is what I do to get you guys even more pissed off. And who better to piss off than Paul? I mean, isn't like the door already open, Paul? They're just like walking into like an already open sliding door. And how do you close it?
I think yes, the door has been cracked and now kicked open, but I think the Saudis owning it is different than the City group completely, because the Public Investment Fund is 100% Saudi Arabia. No matter what anybody tries to tell anyone, it is 100% Mohammed bin Salman. 100%. Yeah. He's the chairman. Like it is Saudi through and through. Like it is that country. And I think David Point makes a really good point in his last comment, not this one, but the one where he says, like, they're going to do a big PR push behind it, donate some money to Newcastle charities, and all be forgotten. Look, sports washing is a real thing. Like, bad people use sports to endear themselves to the public all the time. Go all the way back to 1936 and Hitler hosting the Olympics. All the time, people use sports to endear themselves to the public. And if you're a Newcastle fan, enjoy being rid of Mike Ashley, but understand that, almost everybody right now has somebody in their life they care about that's gay. And if they're in that country, would be dead. Like, I mean, like, people just don't, like, those things have to come home and sink in your heart for anything to change.
Yeah, and I'm with Paul there. And, I have someone very special. I mean, my sister's, is a lesbian. She has a wonderful wife. I have 2 wonderful nieces and nephews, and they're amazing people. And they're raised by 2 of the greatest people in the world. And I found out when I was 10 years old. And you know what I did? I kept it quiet for 7 years because I was worried about how it would be deemed towards me, because I was her little brother, and all she wanted was me to keep it quiet. She'd hate me right now. Luckily, she's not one of the 150,000 people watching right now. But she genuinely would be frustrated with me right now for sharing it, because she's a private person. But I can share it because it's affected who I am and the person I've become. And she's allowed me to share that. So for all these people that I argued with on Facebook about FSG and the ownership and the buying, right, and the power, they called out the Super League. They hammered on them. They one more, how many more times can I see a meme with a bad John Henry apology, right? We're never going to have to apologize because our owners are on the wrong side of civil rights. But we'll hear our own supporters argue that they're on the wrong side of spending. Yet they'll defend the fact that Newcastle supporters should be excited about this because they've waited long enough for a winner. There's something about winning the right way. And then there's something about operating under a cloak of suspicion and danger. And that's what's happening here. We are at a precipice where the largest and most powerful league in Europe is allowing people that 8 to 10 other leagues have deliberately kept out. You realize these guys have been trying to buy major football clubs for years, and leagues have kept them out. But this league is so adept at making money. They genuinely don't care. So Boris Johnson can go up on the news and he can talk about 2-week COVID plans. He can talk about support. He can talk about Brexit. But what they're basically doing is bringing in some of the worst business owners to ever come into England. And they're going to end up putting them on a pedestal that allows them to be something great in that country, which is even scarier. They're supporting it.
Yeah, and I think I was more amazed that it was done so blatantly, to be honest with you. I more expected to be, oh, no, I don't own them. I just happen to own like some shares in them kind of thing, like a investment group, like FST or something like that they formed. And it was the kind of like an extension of them. I didn't think they would make
You mean
so
public
obvious.
investment fund isn't super discreet?
Just like I just did not understand that part. I agree with Ben though. He says the problem is people will block out the reality of the situation because sports are supposed to be an escape from all the terrible stuff that happened in real life. And I agree because I think people, when you bring out this discussion, people are going to be like, oh, I don't want to talk all that stuff. I just want to talk soccer and stuff. But it's kind of like part of the ordeal. But the sad part of it is, the sad truth about it is, I guess, and that's what I'm like more and more realizing as I follow this stuff. And it's been happening over the years. Don't want to sound like a old fart here, but this is the way, sadly, this is going, where the sport is going to be all about money as it gets more professional and professional. You're just going to see more of these than less of these. And like I say, the door is open. So now, like Paul is saying, it's kicked open. Anybody can run it now. And how are they going to say, nope, not you, though, when the guys inside partying are, chopping up people? So how will this change Premier League in the long run, or I guess soccer in the long run? I know it's going to be negative, but all the dark stuff comes from you, Bickler. We'll go with you.
Well, I mean, I think it just changed. Like, I mean, you've already touched on it. Like, I think that basically anybody can come in and buy a club now. Like, the funny thing about that is it's not going to keep the Premier League from trying to stop somebody who they don't think is either going to line their pockets well enough or, they want to try to keep out. And that's the real sad thing is, like, despite this whole ordeal, it doesn't take away the Premier League soapbox. Watch what happens when the Super League comes back, because the Super League will come back. It will come back in some form, and the Premier League will get all up on there and talk about, being inclusive and all this stuff. And the bottom line is, it's just like FIFA. It's just like the FA. It's just like all those guys that sit in Switzerland. Like, it's all about whether they're getting paid out or not. And it's a fucking shame. It's so dirty to me, and it makes me so mad because, like, we got to sit here and listen to them puff their chest out and get self-righteous when they think the time's right to do so. And it just, I don't do well with that kind of hypocrisy.
What do you think, Gally? I mean, it's kind of hard to be optimistic of the future of the game as a whole and stuff like that, just because, like I say, I don't know, it's the old fart of me, but I just see this like getting more and more as opposed to less and less. I mean, we kind of, PSG, City, I mean, before then, obviously Chelsea, Paul alluded to the team that's pretty much the Russian mafia brought to the field. So, like, what do you think? What do you say?
Well, I mean, leave it to the Russian mafia to find and name a team sheriff to bring them to the field. The law has brought this team to all of you. Now, if they can go ahead and keep beating Madrid, I will have no problems because I love laughing at people in Madrid. That's always fun. But in all seriousness, I think the biggest problem is the money. And everyone gets all up in arms about the money and where it's spent and how it's spent. But it's the control of the sport. And that's where I have the biggest concern. So I feel that this will have a sporting impact on the league. And people are like, oh, I don't think they'll ever be any good. They'll maybe win an FA Cup in a few years. Now they can, be the richest club in the championship. Everybody said the exact same things when the City Group bought City. And then they went on to become ultimately the biggest powerhouse right now, spending wise and depth in all of club football outside of maybe PSG, which is another sovereign wealth fund. You know, people thought that Chelsea would never be good when Abramovich bought them because you can't just buy players. But when you get one of the best coaches in the world and then you get him 4 or 5 of the best young players, and then you invest in a youth system, you find your way. And for all the people who think like you can't just buy a big club, Inter Milan was bought by a Chinese consortium. They spent money for 2 years and they stopped Juventus from winning a decade worth of Serie A titles. And they're going to win a second title this year. Now, 2-3 years from now, they probably won't win because they started selling off their top players and eventually another club will come along. I'm not saying Newcastle will go on to be, you know, the next Manchester United. But everybody talks about how just spending money won't win, right? But when Manchester United was the wealthiest club in England and spent the most money for 10 straight years, they won 9 out of 10 titles. This is what happens all over Europe. It's happening in Germany. It happens in France. It happens in Spain. It's happened in Italy. It's happened here in England. So to think that Newcastle can't find their way into the upper echelon, can't fight their way into the top 4, that's just ridiculous. It might take 5-10 years. But these folks' number one concern is being the biggest wealth fund in the world. They've made it clear. They want to supersede. They've been trying to buy into top-level football for a decade because they want to be the next City Group. They want to be the next PSG Group. So this idea that they won't make Newcastle something before they sell them, and don't kid yourself, they will sell them when they realize how awful life is in Newcastle. But they will sell them, but they will also make them successful, and it's just something us as football fans are going to have to deal with.
I mean, I think when Nick is saying like Newcastle can't spend a $200 million and so stay within the guidelines. First of all, I think City has shown everybody that those guidelines are bullshit.
It's actually not true. Newcastle, because Mike Ashley has actually not spent, and because of the TV revenue, Newcastle has $320 million to spend under financial fair play in January if they want to.
I mean, here's the thing. When you have that much money, and like I say, I mean, FFP is really kind of a joke. If City can get around it, I'm sure Newcastle will find a way as well. And yeah, I mean, when you're spending that much money, regardless of how stupidly you spend it, eventually you're going to freaking bounce into or back into like a couple of good signings. That's going to bring you some sort of success, even if it's not. I mean, it depends on how smart they will be. I think one thing City has done is, get the coach and give him some time to slowly build with a ton of money, obviously, like with literally billions. But obviously, these guys can afford the billions. It's just a matter of will they have the same patience that City had initially with Pep, and they got to get a guy of that caliber, which shouldn't be hard with the money. Because I know everybody says that, but once the money is thrown, kind of like FA, I'm sure a manager will be all over that. But, I mean, I feel like when you're spending that much money, you are going to get, obviously, some of the top players, and that will bring you some sort of success, even if it's not constantly winning titles or being a powerhouse and stuff like that. But where do you see them, or how many years do you think, Paul, before we see some level of success from them? I mean, I guess we can start talking about it with this year because as of now, they're kind of in danger of, being like relegated.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious to see how this plays out, right? Because, I mean, there's so much to building a club. You have to have the right staff in place. You have to have a management team that can put it together and have an actual vision. You have to have a uniform vision. Like, to me, you look at any team in the Chinese league and you can throw money at stuff. It doesn't mean you're going to have a good team, right? I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see who they pick up and how it plays out, who wants to go there for a trundle of money. I think, with most things, you talk about team investment, and then you look at us and you talk about reinvesting in grounds and stadiums. To get people interested in Newcastle, they're going to have to build a new Newcastle. In general, not a ton of people consider the Northeast somewhere that you want to go and hang out, right? Like, so it's going to be very interesting. They're going to have to make that a bit of a destination outside of just the money. You look at PSG, Manchester clubs, those are all significant cities with big nightlife. I mean, Newcastle's obviously a big city with its own nightlife, but it's just it's more of a blue collar city. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do across the board. I'm actually quite curious to see how this thing plays out.
Honestly, with the money not being an issue, kind of goes back to what Dave was talking about, like in charities and stuff like that. I mean, they can do a lot of investments without worrying about is the investment going to pay off kind of thing, and do a lot of things for the city. So in the long run, yes, this could be good for like the city itself. But is that how you want the money coming in? I guess is like the biggest talking point. And I know, like Nick is saying, in terms of the academy and stuff, I think they will do that just because it's kind of like a way of bringing in the money and showing the money for the bottom line and stuff like that. But I do not see.
Listen,
probably the Prince doesn't have, he's going to be like patient with it.
Well, here's the thing. Like, Nick is using words like asset and investment. Like, this is not an investment for the Saudis. Correct. This is a dick measuring contest. They're going to throw it on the table, and it's not like, look, they're not concerned about growing players and how much money they make off them. They're not.
Yeah, if anything, that would be like to kind of like weasel their way around FFP, right. Sell it to a club that they giving the money on the other side and things like that to kind of like make the numbers and like the sheets balance. But I mean, that's kind of like the biggest thing I think that we'll yet to see is will they have the same patience that the city owners had? Because I mean, this guy chops up a guy when he doesn't like him. So how many managers are they going to chop up?
But to be fair, the city owners didn't have patience. They came in and they spent $350 million on Kolarov, Silva, Yaya Toure. They brought in Mancini. They fired Hughes overnight. They came in and went deep. They just made mistakes. They signed Zabaleta. They signed Dzeko. They signed Balotelli. They just kept signing every year. Where City got smart was they realized if they really want it to be sustainable and be great for a period, they needed a program. And that's when they hired Teixeira, or however the hell you pronounce his name, from Barcelona, who basically was only hired so they could get Pep 2 years later from Bayern. And they put together a program together to make something special. And
I can see that happening. Like, they're going to come in, they're going to do a bunch of stuff. They're going to make mistakes. You can make mistakes when you got that kind of money, right? I mean, when you're City and you can buy 120 million pounds worth of fullbacks over 2 windows, like you can do that kind of shit, and so we'll see that. It's going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of money and a lot of movement. So, I mean, the football side of it to me is interesting. All the other stuff and our reaction and how the football community in general is not more upset about it, to me is not.
And I'm with Paul on that. I'll say this from a football standpoint, and I've been making this argument for, I want to say 2+ years now, long before when Mike Ashley was there. When everyone has made the argument about where Steven Gerrard should go next, I have always screamed the Premier League job that screams Steven Gerrard is make Newcastle relevant. And then you're ready for a big club. That's the step out of Scotland into a big club with a big fan base and a big stadium. Make them relevant, put a brand on them. I hope I'm wrong, but I believe they're going to throw a shit ton of money in his way and make it hard for him to say no. You know why? Because one thing you need when you need a player to come to the north, to that area of England to live and play, is you need a manager in which they believe in. If you want a Koulibaly to leave Napoli, you need someone they believe in and someone up top. And they're not going to get Zinedine Zidane to come out of his, pseudo-retirement to coach at Newcastle. It's not going to happen, right? But a guy like Steven Gerrard might believe that's his spot. And if he believes there's money behind the project, I hope he doesn't do it, because I would have loved him at the Mike Ashley Newcastle. Because if he was at the scrappy Newcastle, he would have built them into something I'd be proud of to watch play. But I don't want them to sign 4 or 5 young players looking for big money, or 3 or 4 has-beens like a Coutinho and a Bale and folks looking for a last payday, and have Steven Gerrard hang his success on that. But if I were him and they made the call, it would be hard to say no to not leave Rangers for that opportunity if you thought there was going to be real investment. People actually thought he might go to Everton. If he was going to ever go to Everton and those jamokes, he might head up to the Northeast. And I believe it might be where he ends up because I think it makes the right progression step for him. But it will be terrible from the football standpoint because, let's be honest, if Mauricio Pochettino wins the Champions League this year at PSG, anyone going to think he's a better manager than he was at Tottenham when he took that terrible team to the Champions League final? Probably won't.
I know what you're saying, but I mean, maybe for Gerrard, it's an opportunity and, he might not be able to say no. I saw that and I really do not see this group making that kind of a hire. I mean, I expect them to go get, if it's not Zidane, somebody of that caliber, somebody big. Because, I mean, you just mentioned Koulibaly, for example. I don't think Gerrard is a guy that he will want to go play for either. I mean, we think a lot more highly of Gerrard, I think, than the rest of the soccer world does, especially in management. Mick says, for example, Conte. I mean, somebody like that, somebody of that caliber, one that will attract world stars to go there and work for a manager and maybe not think about where the money is coming from and just kind of focus on soccer and stuff like that. But I just feel like if I'm these guys with all this money to be thrown around, I'm not putting Gerrard in charge of that bunch. Because if you put all these world stars, you see all these memes and FIFA lineups where they just got everybody and anybody as the starting 11 and stuff. I mean, if you're putting a team with so many big names, I don't know if Gerrard is the person to kind of lead that. It would be a totally different story if it was at Liverpool because he's so big in the city and means so much for the city, and fans would have so much more patience and stuff like that. But I don't think he will get that time and patience and stuff like that at Newcastle.
I think they're going with an ex-player. I don't think this will be a retread name. This isn't going to be Carlo Ancelotti rolling in for a minute. I think they're going to try to make a moment.
It's interesting because I agree with Dimitri. I think it's going to be a retread. As far as Stevie goes, I think he wants to manage football. I don't think he wants to manage egos. So to me, I don't think I'd like to think he's principled enough that he wouldn't be interested in that job anyway, despite the money. But I just don't I don't see him wanting to go manage a team full of stars at this point in his career. I agree. With Dimitri, I think it's gonna be I think it's gonna be a retread. I think Conte's a pretty good shout. Ancelotti's a good shout. That's just see where I go. But that's what I mean. Where this is going to be interesting because none of us. We don't really know what's going to happen. We just know it's people might die. We don't know.
Here's another thing. Do you want to be a manager and not be successful? You don't know if you're going to get chopped up or not. 15 guys coming in suddenly. Next thing you know.
It'd be in the contract that all meetings are held at Newcastle. I am not flying out of the country.
I love this idea.
Which should happen in the consult in Istanbul, for God's sake.
I love this idea. I love this idea. Ancelotti's going to leave a well-run Madrid team to go coach in Newcastle. That's the type of thing. That's the type of stuff that I don't believe this is going to happen overnight. This is a 4 or 5 year window. They're not going to win right away. And I don't think they're going to. Conte wouldn't stay at Inter Milan because he didn't believe they were going to win the title this year. So he walked.
Look, both those guys have made 30 moves, and they've all probably made weirder moves. So, we'll see what happens.
Okay, well,
we got people on our comments saying Graham Potter. This is where we've gotten to. A Brighton coach is going to be the decision.
We have to draw the line somewhere.
I'm getting laughed at because Gerrard might be an option, winning at Rangers and coming back to the Premier League. And Graham Potter is an option from Brighton.
I think Nick was just trying to bring us all together and agree on something, so we can all agree that it's not going to be Potter.
Yeah, I don't know about Potter either. Like I say, but for the same exact reason. Personally, I would say Potter over Gerrard just because of his Premier League experience, if you're just comparing those two. But again, I'm just saying, if I'm this owner that has billions all over the place and chainsaws to cut up people. I'm just basically picking somebody that's gonna be because you can't put 15 players at the same time. Your first piece is gonna be your manager, and I would make that manager top notch and then give him players, as opposed to getting a new guy and then just giving him like billions of dollars of players. I mean, like I say, if I'm a prince, which hey, I should be, that's what I would do.
I agree with you. My point is I think these guys are going to come in trying to make a statement at first with the coach, because I think if they were really smart, they would actually try to take the extra money they have and be the right size club they are, and literally take a Borussia Dortmund model for the Premier League and try to buy the youngest and best talent around the world and put them on full display, sell and make money, turn things over, be a competitive winning team, but sell off. So when the next Jude Bellingham comes up, you buy Jude Bellingham. You don't let him go to Dortmund. When the next Haaland comes, he comes and plays 3-4 years at Newcastle, and you coach him up and you sell him to Real Madrid, and you turn over and you win. That to me would make sense from them, because they're never going to be a big club. But they can't afford to just go all in and buy a bunch of retreads and roll out a retread manager and think that they're going to be relevant in this league. I think that's going to take a long time, because I do think the projects at United, Chelsea, City, and Liverpool are too far along. I think they have to build something, or they're not winning anything in this league, in my opinion.
Wow.
And
I'll tell you what, from this point on, I'd be careful what the hell you guys say about Newcastle moving forward if you don't want to end up in pieces somewhere in Istanbul. So just tread carefully there, Paul. Especially I'm worried about you over here.
Listen, honestly, given the last couple of weeks that I've had at work, that kind of shit sounds pretty intriguing. Like I'm cool to get like down.
People, so.
I'm cool to be on the bad side of a bond. Maybe let's do it.
Okay, let's try to talk a little bit about our boys and look ahead to the weekend. I figured this was a more interesting topic than the international games, even though Turkey's game was a blast to watch, in a sarcastic kind of way. So we're taking on Watford this weekend. Let's start with you, Gally. What do you kind of expect out of this in terms of lineup and the score? I mean, obviously, the international games kind of throws a curveball in terms of who can come back, when, and all that kind of stuff. But what do you have?
Are we banking on the fact that the Brazilians won't be available for the match based on the quarantine rules and the and the coming in? Obviously, I think Kelleher is going to be in net, and I believe that Jordan will have to play the 6 at the base of the midfield, which I hate, but I do believe that will be what we have. With that, I think it'll be a little bit tougher of a match. I still think we can pull it out. One of my biggest concerns is the new news that Sadio Mane, that they may have to make a decision with Sadio Mane, whether he travels back to England and plays against Watford and then won't be available for the Madrid match, because he's playing in 2 red countries and therefore he wouldn't be able to travel to Madrid. So I really wish I knew what their plan was, because I heard that they may have the Brazilian players go straight to Madrid so that they report to a camp there and therefore they could play midweek against Atletico. If that were the case, they may do the same with Sadio and send him direct. So now we're coming down to, a really makeshift team against a Watford side that I'm not overly worried about. We were jokingly going to talk about our most surprising things. My most surprising thing was going to be that Watford waited till last week to fire their manager. I thought it would have happened at least 5 weeks ago. But with a Claudio Ranieri team, they're going to come out. They're going to play defensively. They're going to be set up to hit us on the counter. And we just got to find a way to pop one in the net and win 1-0. Honestly, that's my goal for Saturday morning. A 1-0 win by 9:30 Eastern.
I think that's what I worry about, is the fact that they do have a new coach and usually, kind of like starts up a team a little bit. And they have a good one at that, which, doesn't mean much to Watford. He'll be gone in no time. But Paul, what are you expecting out of this? Yeah, Jota was being sent back to Liverpool last night.
Yeah, he's not. He's like very doubtful. I don't expect to see him. And this is kind of a scary game because Watford usually turns out for us for whatever reason. They haven't scored more than once in two matches in like last 10 for them. So they're not good offensively. But it's such a thin squad when you take out the Brazilians. Trent's a question mark. Sadio's looking like a question mark. So, I'm going to assume that Trent's going to push out for this. So, I've got Robbo, Verge, Matip, Trent as your back line. But then you've got to, dude, is Thiago ready? He's got to be ready. So you got to push Thiago out. Thiago, I'm guessing, we're going to see, Hendo and the anchor would be my guess. And then you're going to see Milner and Thiago, which I don't love. I don't ever love seeing Milner and Henderson in the same midfield, but I don't know what other options you have. I don't know if Naby's ready yet. I don't know if if we're going to see Keita again. I'm definitely not putting Ox in over Milner. As much as I love Ox, he's been off it the last couple of times he's been out there. And then up top, you have question mark on Sadio. I expect you'll see Salah up top. That'd be my guess. And then, man, dude, is this a Minamino start?
It is. I was just going to say, Paul, I think this is our Taki start we've been calling for. Yep. He's earned it.
Isn't Bobby ready to go?
He's Brazilian. Didn't he go? Didn't he travel?
I thought they didn't call him.
No, he did. He traveled.
Yeah.
And I see Nick just made a comment too. Curtis was hurt with the under-19s.
That's why I had him out of that lineup.
I do. I think this is the Taki start. And I think he starts probably through the center, actually, with Mo playing out on the right and possibly even Divock on the left, as crazy as
almost in a false nine, because we've done that with Minamino before.
Yeah.
We played him in a false nine.
And it's probably where he probably belongs, kind of in his role with this club. I hope he plays well. I do agree with Paul. I think it's one of those awkward ones. The one side, again, I say this every week, and, Jurgen will never listen to me. I could see Shemika starting at left back because I genuinely believe, and anyone who watched that Scotland match the other day knows, Robo put in 150,000 minutes worth of effort in the 90-plus minutes he played, where he was the best player on the pitch in that Scotland match. And that Scotland match was insane. If anyone on this pod listening or watching us now hasn't seen it yet, go back and watch the excitement that breaks out in that stadium as they score, as McTominay hits the game winner. It's unbelievable, the energy they have. But they're not going to rest him for a second. And at some point, Klopp's going to have to look at the fact that every time he sends him away on international duty, he plays more for his country than he does for Liverpool. And I'd argue he plays more for Liverpool than anyone at our club.
I want to sort of bang on Scotland for running Robo into the ground, but they make such good fucking whiskey, and we also do the same thing to them, so I can't.
I was just going to say, what good is it banging on Scotland for the fact that our club has signed
we do the same thing.
Players to back him up and hasn't given him a break in 5 years?
Dude, and I miss Costa's corners, man. I miss them. We score off them. I feel like it's like playing NBA Jam when you're on fire. I feel like there's an 85%. I feel like there's an 85% chance that a Costa's corner is going to find somebody for a goal.
Yeah, it's pretty much like an alley-oop to Sean Kemp.
Yes,
you're going to score.
Oh, there's a lot of young audience.
We should try to rename him Gary Payton and see if anybody catches on.
You're either going to score on that alley-oop to Sean Kemp, or you're going to get a woman pregnant. But either way, Sean Kemp did well.
Yes. Hopefully not underage like Karl Malone.
Nick sums it up perfectly for me. I hate international breaks as well. I mean, it has becoming worse and worse. But I'll tell you guys, for example, Turkey's game today. You thought Scotland game was good. Turkey played a game where they have to win to keep their chances in. And they were down 1-0 after the 70th minute. Then they tie it up on the 95th minute. A penalty where it wasn't a penalty. The ref is called to watch the monitor. This is the 96th minute when there was only 4 extra minutes added, and they scored to keep their hopes in. so that they can crush it in November. So for another month, the entire country will be hopeful, and then we'll get crushed in November sometime. So, but that's what you look forward to if you're a Turkish fan in the international break. Another reason to freaking hate him on top of these injuries and everything like that. Well, gentlemen, want to do some score predictions for this weekend? I know Gally said 1-0. It's not good that early in the morning for my hearts. What do you have there, Paul?
Yeah, I'll go 2-0.
Damn, I was going to go with 2-0 too. I like 2-0. Hopefully it will be a little bit better. Nick says if you want to watch disappointment on an international pitch, watch Ireland. See, I think I'd rather have a team that doesn't get my hopes up like that in some ways. Like if Turkey lost the first 4 games and then be like, you know what, I'll be like, whatever, I'll just watch it for the fun of it. When they just keep the suspense, it's like a bad movie. You know it's going to end, but you just keep going. You know, so that's Turkish.
It's all right. You could be the U.S. who pretends they're really good and then like just does what they do.
Yeah, we have a few minutes if you want to throw in a loss to Panama rant here, Gally.
It's fucking disgusting. I tell you right now. No, I'm serious. So, full disclosure, as most people know, you throw it out there. I'm from Massachusetts, right? So I'm sitting here in Massachusetts yesterday. You know, I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm not going to hide that. I know the FSG out people, automatically believe that, the fact the Red Sox won a playoff game yesterday means that we're going to spend $50 million less next year on Liverpool spending. It has nothing to do with it. And just so you know, we picked nobody up either at the deadline this year, the Red Sox. They did absolutely nothing. But I'm sitting here in Western Massachusetts watching the Patriots just absolutely look terrible in Houston, and I hate the Patriots, so that was kind of fun. I got my wife getting ready for the Buffalo Bills about to play their biggest game in the year against the Chiefs, which they laid down the marker to let everyone know that they could win the Super Bowl. In between, I'm on this epic game, and then I am stupid enough to bring up the United States men's national team on my laptop, which I end up uber focusing on while I watch Greg Berhalter walk in circles, talk to himself on the sidelines, look like an absolute idiot. After the game, the guy actually walks up to the podium and says, well, I mean, Tyler Adams hasn't been playing much for his club, so I decided to start Jossie fucking Zardes. You're starting a guy from the MLS who isn't good enough to score goals for Columbus. And you put a guy up front. You have an 18-year-old kid who's scoring goals at every instance that he walks on the pitch. All of Europe, including Bayern and Inter Milan, are trying to buy the 17-year-old kid. And your idea is to roll out a bunch of has-beens in Panama and then complain like the pitch was the problem. The pitch isn't the problem. The manager and the tactics are the problem. So we can go back to hating on Klinsmann. We can go back to blaming everybody for why we didn't make the last World Cup, when the truth is it's the federation, the program, and the setup. It has nothing to do with the talent. The players are there. They need a coach who understands tactics and can compete on a national level. And I'm not talking about a national level that competes in CONCACAF. Who gives a shit about CONCACAF? Okay? All right. I'm done.
Man.
Listen,
best part of hosting this podcast is just lighting fuses of the dynamite. Just go and just let it go.
Gally almost makes me like international breaks.
I know when I saw the final score, and I didn't watch the game obviously, but when I saw the final score, I was like, "Oh, this has to get him so heated."
Have you seen the goal? Have you actually seen the goal?
Actually, I have not. Should I YouTube that, Jen?
It will make you believe Tim Ream must have been starting, because only Tim Ream at a center back would allow that goal. But then Walker Zimmerman proved he's just a younger version of a slow white Tim Ream.
Wow, this is great. That's the only reason to root against U.S. sometimes, I think, in the national game, so we can get this reaction. But
I root for Turkey just to see your reactions.
See, this is why I even don't do international breaks. They have 3 kids to be disappointed in. I don't need this
There's
kind
a lot
of stuff.
to be said when Paul is the calmest and most laid back out of our 3.
I think there was less stress with Paul with his 3 boys at the pumpkin patch yesterday than there was in my living room getting me through the 1:00 football to the Red Sox game 3 or 4 to the international break to the Bills game, which then needed an hour and a half freaking storm delay that has led me to the overtiredness that I am today. It's ridiculous.
Well, if this is overtired, damn, I wish we had a full-blown one. But, well, gentlemen, let's wrap it up for this week. Hopefully we'll get together next Monday, same time, talk about a Watford win, and get ready for the Champions League, Premier League, back and forth. Thank you for all those commenting, joining us on live broadcast. You can also watch this again on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel, as well as now in our group in LFC America. And we'll see you guys next week. Take care.